The universe was supposed to be full of life. We thought that anyway. For 200 years, we used every tool we had to reach out in the dark. Radio telescopes as big as cities looked at the sky. Probes were sent into the void, one after the other, carrying messages of hope and friendship. We heard, we waited, we had dreams. The universe, on the other hand, stayed quiet. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station 7 and looked out at the stars that seemed to go on forever. Her reflection in the reinforced glass showed a woman in her 40s with grey hair, pulled back, and eyes that looked like they had seen too many disappointments. Another negative sweep. Her assistant, Marcus Webb, sat behind her. His voice was flat and resigned. Sarah didn't look back. How many does that add up to? 712,000. Just cosmic background noise and dead rocks. The truth had come down on people like a heavy blanket. We were by ourselves, not just in our solar system or our part of the galaxy. There was a lot of proof. Hundreds of star systems have been looked at, and thousands more have been scanned. Gone. All of them. Rocks that are empty, gas giants that are always stormy, and asteroids that drift in silence forever. The realization had changed everything. The Great United Earth Space Initiative, which used to be a source of pride for all of humanity, was falling apart. Every year, the budget got smaller. The huge campus that used to have 30,000 of the smartest people on Earth now only had 3,000. The others had moved on, gone back to Earth, and were now working on problems that could be solved. Director Chen, a voice crackled over the intercom. 20 minutes until the council meeting. They want to know what you think about Project Horizon. Sarah shut her eyes. Project Horizon, the last of the big missions, a beautiful, sleek ship built to travel to the Andromeda Galaxy over the course of 15,000 years, carrying frozen embryos and digital consciousness as a legacy of humanity. The cost was through the roof, 3 trillion credits, things from every country on Earth. And for what? To look for more empty rocks that go around faraway suns? The council chamber was cold and clean. There were 15 faces on the screens, each one representing a major country or company that paid for the last bits of space exploration. They seemed tired. People were getting tired. Director Chen, said Administrator James Ross, his British accent clear, even though it was late in London. Your suggestion? Sarah opened her report. Months of study, predictions, ratios of cost to benefits. Even though her heart didn't want to believe them, the numbers were clear. Project Horizon should be stopped, she said in a low voice. Earth would be a better place to spend the resources. Restoration of the climate, farming in the ocean, the colonies on Mars need help. We should focus on staying alive, not on dreams that led nowhere. It was like a funeral after the silence. So that's it then, said Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Tokyo delegation. We gave up. We're being realistic, Sarah said, even though the words tasted like ash. 200 years of looking, nothing. We need to accept that the universe is dead. The vote didn't take long. Everyone agreed. The official word is that Project Horizon is over. Sarah was alone in the dark room as the screens went out one by one. The young girl who had looked up at the stars from her backyard in California was screaming somewhere in her head. But that girl was now an adult, had learned that the universe didn't care about what people wanted. She was putting her notes together when Marcus came into the room with a tablet in one hand and eyes wide open, as if he had seen something he hadn't seen in years. Excitement. Sarah, you have to see this. Someone just sent in a proposal to open forum. Marcus, we're closing down. There's no point in just look at it. She frowned as she took the tablet. The name of the proposal was The 50-Cent Spaceship. There was no information about the author, Jake Morrison, such as credentials or an institutional affiliation, only a name and a place. Detroit, MI. Sarah started to read, and even though she felt like she had failed for 200 years, her eyebrows slowly rose. The idea was crazy, totally, completely crazy. Morrison suggested making a ship to explore deep space out of only old parts, broken technology, and open source collaboration. No big budgets, no new research, just small engineering and people being smart. He thought that the total cost would be about 50 cents for each person on Earth. 4 billion people, a total of 2 billion credits. It was funny compared to the Project Horizon's 3 trillion. The design was rough and drawn up in simple CAD software, a patchwork ship made from old satellite parts, old station modules that are about to be burned up in the atmosphere, and mining equipment from asteroid mining operations that are no longer in use. The propulsion system was based on a 40-year-old iron drive design that hobbyists and garage engineers had improved, but that official channels never used because it wasn't elegant enough. There was even a part about the crew. They had to be volunteers, work for free, and promise to be part of humanity's last real attempt to reach the stars. There was one line at the bottom of the proposal that made Sarah's throat tighten. We've been asking for the wrong question. Instead of asking, are we alone? We should ask, what will we do with our aloneness? If the universe is empty, we fill it. We make the stars sing when they are quiet. This ship won't look good. It won't be perfect, but it will be ours, made by people from the pieces of our broken dreams. And maybe that's just what we need. Sarah looked up at Marcus. This is crazy. I know. It would never work. Probably not. Just the engineering problems would be. Sarah, Marcus leaned in. When was the last time someone made a suggestion? When was the last time someone looked up instead of down? She looked at the rough drawing on the screen. A ship made of trash. A task for a fool. A dream that is stuck in duct tape and despair. Make a call with Jack Morrison. She heard herself say, I want to meet the person who thinks this might work. Marcus smiled, which was the first real smile she'd seen from him in months. Done already. He's waiting. The video call went through, and Sarah saw an African American man in his 50s with graying stubble and kind eyes that showed both intelligence and sadness. He was sitting in what looked like a messy workshop, with tools and electronics all over the place behind him. Dr. Chen, Jack Morrison said, Thanks for your time. Mr. Morrison, I'll be direct. Your idea is crazy. Yes, ma'am, it is. The safety concern alone are big, I know. The chances of success are low. I also know that. Sarah sat back. Then why? Jack was quiet for a moment, and his eyes were far away. We found the first exoplanet that might have life. When my daughter was 8, she was very happy. I stayed up all night watching the news and waiting for the results. She cried when they came back negative. She said, That's okay, Daddy. There are more planets. We'll find them. He coughed. She's 34 years old now, teaches in Detroit. And do you know what she said to me last week? She said, I'm glad I didn't waste my time dreaming about space. At least I paid attention to real life. Sarah felt something break in her chest. Jack went on. She was right to dream. And we shouldn't have let her stop. Not because we'll find aliens, save the world, or fulfill some great purpose, but it's the act of reaching out, trying, and building something together that makes us human. If we stopped doing that and just accept the silence and look down at our feet forever, we might as well be dead already. The workshop behind him became easier to see. Sarah could see drawings on the wall, circuit boards, a model of the ship he wanted to build out of soda cans and wire. Jack said, I don't have credentials. I'm just a guy who used to work in the auto industry until the plants closed. I learned engineering on my own through online classes. We started a maker space in my neighborhood where we fix things that are broken and make new things. We have welders, programmers, mechanics, and dreamers. Mr. Morrison, Jack, please. Jack, Sarah said softly. I can't support this, even if I wanted to, because the council has already voted. Our resources are going to Earth. There isn't enough money in the budget for experimental spacecraft made from trash. Jack said simply. Then we don't use their budget. That's the whole point. Design that is open source, funding from the community, people who help out. The space agencies have been spending trillions on perfect ships and the latest technology. And what did it do for us? Silence that cost a lot. It's time to try cheap noise. Maybe. Sarah looked at the proposal for once more, at the rough sketches, the hopeful timelines, the guts to think that something like this could work. She thought about Jack's daughter and how she was learning to stop dreaming. She thought about the girl she used to be as she looked up at the stars, 200 years into the great silence. She thought about people slowly forgetting how to reach. She said slowly, if I were to show this to the council, they would laugh me out of the room. Jack nodded. Most likely, I would lose all my credibility. Most likely, and it probably still wouldn't work. No, ma'am, it probably wouldn't. Sarah Chen, head of the United Earth Space Initiative, looked at this middle aged man from Detroit who dared to dream with scraps and 50 cents. She smiled and said, well, then, I guess we should get going. The first public announcement of the 50-cent spaceship project got the exact amount of ridicule that Sarah had expected. One headline read, Junk Ship to Save Humanity. Last ditch effort by the Space Agency Director, read another. The late night comedy shows had a lot of fun. There were a lot of memes on social media showing broken shopping carts with the words Earth's new flagship on them. But something else also happened. A lot of emails started coming in, a lot of them. Then tens of thousands. Retired aerospace engineers from the good old days of space exploration, when the agencies that fired them had long since forgotten them. Computer scientists who had spent decades writing code for satellites and probes are now working boring jobs in the business. Welders, electricians, people who make things and mechanics, students studying engineering with no future, no jobs waiting for them, in a world that had stopped making big things. And regular people. There are so many normal people. A teacher from Mumbai who had studied astrophysics before changing careers. A carpenter from Oslo who used to make model rockets when he was kid. A chef from Sao Paulo who said she couldn't help the volunteers with anything but could feed them. A grandmother from Nairobi who had sewn parachutes for landing craft when she was younger and still knew how. They came from all over, people from all over the world, from all walks of life, and they all said, let me help. Sarah stood in the Assembly Bay 7, which had just reopened. It was a huge building that had been closed for 5 years after the last major project ended. There was a draft. Some of the lights didn't work, and it always smelled like rust and old dreams. Okay, people, it was perfect. A salvaged speaker system made Jack Morrison's voice echo through the room. Welcome to the impossible. There were almost 200 people on the bay floor, and thousands more watched through video feeds from workshops and makerspace all over the world. Sarah saw people of all ages and races. We're going to build a starship, Jack said as he walked back and forth in the front of a huge screen that showed the design changing. Not with unlimited money or the latest technology. We will build it with our own hands, our brains, and anything else we can find. And yes, people will make fun of us. Let them. We aren't doing this for them. We're doing this for us. The design had changed a lot from Jack's first sketches. A core group of volunteer engineers had been putting in 18 hours days, refining, testing, and arguing, and making changes. The ship's skeleton would be made from old space station modules that were supposed to be thrown away. These were huge, cylindrical pieces. The outer hull would be made of thousands of pieces of satellite planting that had been salvaged and put together like a giant jigsaw puzzle. The hardest part was getting it to move. Old fashioned chemical rockets were too costly and too limited. Iron drives worked better, but they weren't very strong. Then a group from Seoul came up with a crazy idea, a hybrid system that would use three different obsolete drive technologies at the same time. Each one on its own was not enough. When combined with smart programming and careful calibration, they could make enough thrust to travel deep into space. The ship wouldn't be quick, it wouldn't look good, but the simulations show that it would really work. We're calling it the Pioneer Spirit, Sarah said, showing off the latest version. The ship looked like what it was, a patchwork ship that isn't symmetrical and has seams and sections that don't match. Someone had already given it the name, the beautiful disaster. Life support, someone yelled. Recycled from the old Mars transit station, said Dr. Elena Volkov, a Russian atmospheric engineer who had been persuaded to come out of retirement. Systems that were thought to be insufficient for luxury, but more than enough for survival. We're taking away comfort and putting more emphasis on function. Communication, salvaged arrays from weather satellites, said Marcus, who was in charge of the project's technical side. Will have a better range than anything else humans have ever sent into space, just because we don't have to worry about money. Instead of perfection, we can use redundancy. The questions kept coming, and the team had answers for them. Answers that aren't always right or certain, but are based on real engineering, physics, and possibility. The project went from being a crazy idea to real hardware over the next few months. 50 volunteers worked in a warehouse in Shanghai to fix up the station modules. They took out anything that wasn't needed, reinforced weak points, and got them ready to be the bones of the starship. Jack's makerspace in Detroit became the center of electronic system. They tested, reprogrammed, and combined circuit boards that they got from the thousands of different places. A group of teens who learned to code online made the operating system by building an open source framework. They made it modular and strong. The Norwegian team in Oslo worked on the docking mechanisms to make sure that all of these parts from different times, project, and manufacturers could really fit together. And in Nairobi, a revolution in making things was going on. The team couldn't afford traditional aerospace manufacturing, so they used recycled metal and polymers to make custom connectors, brackets, and seals with industrial 3D printers. It took longer than factory production, but it was much more adaptable. The project was funded by a lot of volunteer work, small donations, and corporate sponsorships from companies that wanted to be good. that wanted to do good. The 50 cents per person was more of a symbol than a real amount, but the idea stayed the same. This was everyone's ship, not the government's or the corporations. Sarah had to work 16 hours a day, coordinating teams across 12 time zones and fixing problems that were technical, logistical, and very human. One morning, Marcus, who looked tired, said, "The Tokyo team and the Beijing team are fighting again." About what? Welding techniques, both claiming that their way is better. Sarah rubbed her temples. Set up a video call with both of them. Let them show us their method. And then we'll test both and use the one that works best. They won't like that. They don't have to like it. They need to make a spaceship. But not everything was a fight. Sarah saw something beautiful came out of the mess. Engineers who had spent their whole careers working alone, fighting for money, and keeping secrets were now sharing everything: plans, methods, mistakes, and success. The whole project was recorded in real time, an open platform that anyone could access from anywhere. A high school class in Argentina followed the development of electrical systems and found a big mistake that the professional engineers had missed. Their teacher was very proud of them, and they were added to the credits. An artist group in Paris made pictures of the ship that caught the attention of people all over the world. This made the beautiful disaster something people could get behind. Grace Kimani was the grandmother from Nairobi, and she did sue. She was in charge of a group that made the interior fabric parts like seat covers, storage bags, and partition curtains, all out of recycled materials. She worked with quiet dignity, and her skilled hands moved with practiced precision. "Grandpa told me stories," she said to Sarah one day as they looked over her work, "about how his village worked together to build a school using only their hands and materials they found. People with money in the city laughed at them, but that school is still there, even after 70 years, still teaching kids." She held up a storage bag that was perfectly sewn and reinforced at all the stress points. "This ship is our school. People in the future will look back and see what we made out of nothing." 9 months into the project, they had their first big problem. The main AI system, which had been salvaged from an old planetary survey probe, was in the process of being integrated when it suddenly crashed. Not only did it crash, but it also got messed up. Gone are thousands of hours of programming. The team was heartbroken. The AI was supposed to take care of navigation, system monitoring, and emergency responses. The ship was just a big piece of metal that cost a lot of money. Sarah called a meeting right away. The mood was bad. Marcus said, "We could start over," but he didn't sound sure. "Start over from scratch?" Dr. Volkov said. "That would add at least 8 months. And we're already late. Donors are getting impatient." Jack was unusually quiet in the corner. Sarah asked, "What about the other option? The approach of the distributed system?" That caught everyone's eyes. It was an idea that had been suggested at first, but was turned down because it seemed too risky. They would use dozens of smaller, simpler systems that work together instead of one big AI. "This is like a swarm, intelligence instead of single brain. It's never been tested at this scale," Marcus said. "For something this important, everything about this project has been never been tested." Jack cut in, finally speaking. "That's the point. We're not following the rules of the game. We're writing a new one." He got up and walked over to display that showed the ship's current design. "What did we do every time we hit a wall? We found a different way. This AI breaks, okay? We don't need to be fancy. We need to have backups. We need systems that can break down without killing everyone. That's what we get from the swarm method." Sarah looked around the room. "Yes, I saw fear, but also the crazy hope that had brought them all here." "Vote," she said. "Should we rebuild the central AI or move to distributed systems. The vote was close, but distributed systems came out on top. It was a tough 3 months after that. Groups of people from all over the world worked on different AI modules for navigation, life support, communications, and propulsion. Each one was simple enough to work, but together they were smart enough to deal with difficulties of space travel. The system was messy and not very elegant, which is exactly the kind of thing that would never pass a normal review. But the first time they did an integrated test, it worked. Not quite. The system sometimes fought with each other and had to work out on a solution. It was slower than a central AI that was streamlined, but it was also tough. When they crashed modules on purpose, the others made up for it. It learned, changed, and lived. Marcus said, "It's kind of beautiful," as he watched the data flows. "Like watching a talk?" Sarah grinned. "It's just like us. A bunch of parts that don't fit together but do anyway." 14 months after Jack Morrison sent in his crazy idea, things started to come together. Heavy transport brought the station modules to the assembly bay. They were huge, cylindrical pieces that looked old and worn. There were a lot of volunteers who cleaned, fixed, and reinforced them. Next came the hull plates, thousands of them, each one numbered and put in its place. Putting everything together took a lot of planning, with teams working in shift around the clock. Sarah stood on the observation platform and watched the pioneer spirit take shape below her. It was not pretty. There was no other way to say it. The hull was a mix of different colors because different satellites had added their own skin to it. The propulsion section stuck out in an uneven way because they had to work around existing structural problems. The communication array stuck out at strange angles. It looked like it was a ship made of trash and dreams. It was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen. "We're really doing this," she said quietly. Grace Kimani stood next to her with the first set of interior fabric. "Of course we are, kid. Did you ever doubt?" "Every single day." The older woman laughed. "Good. Doubts make us honest. But look," she pointed to the work floor below, where hundreds of people were moving with purpose. Each one a small part of something that couldn't be done. "This is what we do. We've always done this. We fix things that are broken. We turn nothing into something. That's what people are really good at, making sense out of chaos, not making things perfect." Sarah saw a young woman from Seoul team carefully welding a joint, while an older man from Detroit showed her how to do it. Saw a programmer in Mumbai fix a connection problem with the help of a mechanic in Oslo over video chat. I saw all these people from all over the world working together to build something. "You know, what's the best part?" Sarah asked. "Even if this doesn't work out, if the ship never launches or launches and falls apart, we've already won. We have already shown that we can still work together, that we can still make things, that we can still have hope." Grace nodded her head. "That's true, but it won't fail." "How do you know for sure?" The woman smiled. "Because it was made with love, dear. Things made with love don't break easily." The pioneer spirit, which is a 50-cent miracle for humanity, grew piece by piece below them. It was ugly, flawed, and completely real. The way the crew was chosen was unlike anything else in the history of space exploration. In the past, astronauts were picked from very small groups of people, like military pilots, scientists with multiple PhDs, and people who had spent their whole lives getting ready for the challenges of space. They went through years of training, mental testing, and physical conditioning. The pioneer spirit had 6 months and almost no money. "We need 12 people," Sarah said at the crew selection meeting. 12 people ready to leave Earth on a ship, held together by hope and determination, going into the void with no promise of coming back. Do you know how many applications we've gotten? Marcus asked as he pulled up the numbers. Sarah's eyes got bigger. 37,000? 37,416 as of this morning from 73 different countries. The applications were both heartbreaking and inspiring. A father who had lost his family and had nothing else to lose. A doctor who wanted to make the first medical rules for space. A musician who had said she wanted to play her violin in the quiet between stars. A young man from Bangladesh who grew up poor and thought this was his only chance to touch infinity. They couldn't use the usual criteria for choosing because they didn't have the time or money. Sarah put together a panel of volunteers that included psychologists, former astronauts, engineers, and, at Jack's request, a teacher and a social worker. We're not working for perfection, Jack told the panel. We want to see strength, to able to change, for people who can work together even when things go wrong. The selection process looked for three things: a range of skills, the ability to stay calm under pressure, and a real commitment to the mission. They did interviews over video, watched applications, solved problems in real time, and saw how they got along with others. They got their crew after 3 months of hard work. Amira Hassan, a 42-year-old Egyptian woman who used to be a pilot in the Air Force and then switched to commercial aviation when the military's budget ran out, was the commander. She stayed calm under pressure, had more flights hours than anyone else in the applicant pool, and had a quiet authority that made people feel at ease. Thomas O'Brien, an Irish mechanic who had worked on the Mars Colony transport before they were taken out of service, was the engineer and second in command. He could fix anything with just a few tools, and his dark sense of humor could come in handy. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's daughter, Kenji Tanaka, was the medical officer. She followed her mother into science but focused on emergency medicine. She was one of the youngest at 31, but her experience working in disaster zones made her very valuable. Carlos Rogers, from Mexico, was an expert in navigation and communication. He used to work on satellites and learned astrophysics on his own through open courseware. He was very good with systems and had a natural understanding of how things move in space. Nina Okonvo, from Nigeria, was the life support specialist. She was an environmental engineer who had built closed loop systems for research stations in remote areas. She was best at keeping people alive with few resources. Dr. Rachel Cohen from Israel was the science officer. She was a biologist who had spent years looking for extremophile life in the harshest places on Earth. She would find anything that was alive out there. The other crew members had just as important skills. Dmitry Volkov, Elena's nephew, for computer system, Maria Santos for botany and food production, James Park for geology and resource analysis, Aisha Muhammad for psychology and crew dynamics, Levy for mechanical system, and finally Jack Morrison himself. Even though everyone told him not to go. I'm 62, Jack said when Sarah tried to talk him out of it. I know I'm old, but I know this ship better than anyone else. Every system, every workaround, and every compromise. We need someone who knows not only how it's supposed to work, but also how it really does. Sarah had wanted to say no, but he was correct. The training was hard and disorganized. They had 6 months to get 12 people ready for the most dangerous trip in history. The crew trained on the ship itself, which was only partially finished, and learned how to use all of its system. They practiced how to handle emergencies in the shell of the ship, coming up with workarounds when standard procedures didn't work with their usual setup. They lived together in small spaces at Assembly Bay, getting to know each other's habits, quirks, and breaking points. There were fights. There were tears. But over time, they grew to be more than 12 people. They formed a crew. Launch day came faster than anyone thought it would, and slower than anyone could stand. The launch platform was repurposed commercial rocket stage that had been changed to carry the big ship into orbit. From there, the crew would take a shuttle to the ship, which would then start its journey using its own engine. Sarah stood in the control center with volunteers who had turned into mission control. They didn't have as many resources as regular launches, but they made up for it with their passion. The crew was already on the shuttle, waiting for the last go ahead. Sarah had said goodbye to each of them in person. Amira's firm handshake, Thomas' rude greeting, Jack's warm hug felt too much like a goodbye. All systems green, Marcus said, but his voice was tight with stress. The weather is perfect. The launch window will open in 10 minutes. Everyone in the world was watching. People from all over the world watched on all kinds of devices. Over the past few months, the mocking had died down as the ship took shape, and many people were genuinely interested and hopeful. It wasn't a project for the government or a business. This was the ship of all the people, built by volunteers, paid for by millions of small donations, and crewed by people who represented all of them. Mission control to pioneer crew, Sarah said into the microphone. Her voice went out to the world and the shuttle. You can go ahead and launch. Amira's voice came back, steady and strong. Got it. See you on the other side. The countdown started. 10. Sarah thought about the last 200 years of silence. 9. About big plans that didn't work out. 8. About a crazy idea that came from the Detroit. 7. About 1,000 volunteers are welding, coding, swinging, and dreaming. 6. About Grace Kimani saying that things made with love don't break easily. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. The rockets caught fire, and the shuttle, which was carrying the first crew to the impossible ship of humanity, rose into the sky on the pillar of fire. Everyone in the control center cheered, but Sarah couldn't say anything. She watched the telemetry and the perfect arc of ascent, and tears streamed down her face. Marcus said, "The shuttle has reached orbit, beginning to get close to the pioneer spirit." The next few hours were very tense. The crew moved from the shuttle to the ship, where they ran system checks to make sure that everything that had worked on the ground still worked in space. "This is Commander Hassan." Amira's voice finally came through. "We are on board. Pioneer Spirit. All crew members are present." Starting up the first system. The systems on the ship started up one by one. The distributed AI network came to life, with modules talking to each other and agreeing on status checks. The cycles of life support began. The propulsion system got hot. The communication array were set up, and the antennas that didn't match looked like awkward wings. "Control, there's a problem." Sarah's heart sank. "Go ahead, Piona." The forward observation port won't close all the way. We're losing pressure in section E. Thomas' Irish accent came through. "I see what the problem is. During launch vibration, one of the seals didn't fit right. Give me 20 minutes." Myra said calmly. "You have 15. We have to leave now, or we'll be stuck in the orbit for another week." The control center held its breath. They could see telemetry on the screens that showed Thomas in a spacesuit, working on the seal on the outside. The tools he had insisted on bringing were finally being put to good use. "Seal is fixed," came 12 minutes later. "Running pressure test now. Pressure holding. For 14 minutes. We're fine." Jack's voice came through, warm with humor. "Welcome to the pioneer spirit, where everything is held together by willpower and really good duct tape." There was a nervous laugh in control. "Control, this is Hassan, asking for permission to start the departure sequence." Sarah looked at Marcus, the volunteers who had come together, and the screens that showed a ship that shouldn't exist with a crew that shouldn't be there. "Permission granted. Beyond spirit, Godspeed." The ship's hybrid propulsion system turned on. It wasn't like chemical rocket, which are very dramatic. Instead, there was a steady, growing thrust as ion drives, electromagnetic accelerators, and salvage plasma thrusters all work together in their messy, imperfect way. The pioneer spirit, a beautiful disaster, and a miracle for all of the humanity, started to move. The crew got used to their routines over the next few days and weeks and learned about all the ways their ship was different from any other ship that had come before it. Systems that should have been automated needed to be watched over by people. The distributed AI was useful, but it sometimes couldn't make up its mind. So people had to make the decision. Everything took longer, needed more focus, and needed more creativity. But the ship stayed together. Amira wrote down Day 17 log. We've finished our lunar orbit slingshot and are now on our way to fly by Jupiter. The ship is doing okay so far. Thomas has fixed 43 different systems. We call him the miracle worker, but he says the real miracle is that anything works at all. The mental problems were real. 12 people in a small space, stress rising, and the reality of their mission setting in. They were going out into the void, to the edge of the solar system and beyond, looking for anything, any sign that the universe wasn't completely dead. Aisha Muhammad, the psychologist, quickly became the most important person on the crew. She set up group sessions, one on one check ins, and activities to keep people mentally healthy. It's like we're not just exploring space, she told Sarah during a scheduled call. We're looking into what it means to be human when everything we know is gone. Their first problem happened in week 8. The main system for recycling water broke down in a big way. A lot of little problems came together at the worst possible time. Parts that didn't fit together, resonance frequencies that weren't expected, and a seal that wore out faster than expected. We're losing water, Nina said, her usually calm voice full of fear. We'll be in trouble in 72 hours at this rate. The crew went into emergency mode. Thomas and Nina took the system apart in an effort to fix it. Maria Santos started giving the plants less water. Everyone cut back on what they used to the bare minimum. They still didn't have a solution after 48 hours. Sarah and the ground team worked around the clock, doing simulations and talking to engineers all over the world. They thought of 3 possible fixes, but each one was risky. We don't have the parts for the option 1, Thomas said. Option 2 needs a spacewalk with tools we don't have. Option 3 is crazy, Nina said. We would be basically rewiring the system with parts from the backup atmospheric scrubbers. But would it work? Amara asked. Maybe. 60% chance. We lose both water recycling and part of our air system if it doesn't work. The crew made a choice. Democracy in the dark. Option 3 won, but it was a close. Nina and Thomas worked in ship's small mechanical spaces for 18 hours, changing systems and making parts that were made for one purpose work for another. The rest of the crew held their breath and saved every drop of water, getting ready for the worst case scenario. Moment of truth, Thomas said, starting up the hybrid system in 3, 2, 1. The recycler started to hum. Gogs went up. The distributed AI network noticed that the setup was strange and talked about it for a few seconds, but agreeing to the new one. We have water flow, Nina said in a low voice. It works. It's really working. You could feel the crew's relief. But something else happened as well. They understood what they could not. Not just following the rules, but also making new ones. Jack said at a crew meeting that night. That's what makes this different. They weren't just using the ship, they were really understanding it, adapting it, and making it their own. All the other ships were built to certain tolerances and were meant to be run by the book. There isn't a book for pioneer spirit. We're writing it as we go along. We're not just getting by, we're learning how to thrive in ways no mission has ever done before. They got to the Jupiter 3 months into the mission. The gas giant filled their observation ports with a huge swirl of storms and bands of color. The pioneer spirit used Jupiter's gravity to slingshot itself, which sped it up on its way to the outer solar system and beyond. It's beautiful, Rachel Cohen said softly as she watched the planet go by. It's dead. Carlos Rogers said in response, like everything else we've found. But Rachel was using her tools to scan the moons and look at the data, and then she saw something. Commander, she said slowly, you have to see this.